Hey, this is Steve Gill. As the Obamacare fight moves to the Supreme Court, things are not looking quite so good for the Obama team on keeping Obamacare alive. It's actually on life support, with even liberal justices of the Supreme Court asking tough questions. Now, on Monday, they were fighting over whether or not the case should really even be heard, based upon the argument of the Obama team that it was really a tax, not a fine, because they had to argue that it was a tax, despite what they claimed during the push for Obamacare, because the president promised they would not raise taxes. And yet Congress has authority to tax, not to fine. So Monday, in order to keep the hope alive in pushing Obamacare past the Supreme Court, they had to argue it was a tax that they were using to enforce the mandate. Then on Tuesday, they show up arguing, no, today it's a fine, because we aren't really using taxes as the way. It's a penalty, it's a fine that is really at the heart of the mandate. The justices weren't exactly buying that argument, any more than they were buying the idea that the U.S. government should be able to force people to buy a particular health insurance, any more than they should be able to force us to buy a particular cell phone, broccoli, or anything else that the government might want to impose upon us. Even liberal justices were concerned about the slippery slope of where this may go. When you've lost Sonia Sotomayor, or at least she's raising tough questions, you know you've got an uphill battle with the conservative justices that may be fully in the anti-Obamacare camp. As the case moves ahead, it's going to be a while till the result actually comes down. But the real issue is whether or not Obamacare can survive the challenge before the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, James Carville says that if the Obamacare plan gets stricken by the Supreme Court, that's great news for the Democrats. They'll be able to put the Republicans on guard, on defense when it comes to health care issues. And yet, if they're so determined that that's a good idea, why'd they push so hard to pass Obamacare? They thought that they would get political benefit from passing it. And yet now, over 2/3 of Americans oppose Obamacare. In fact, 2/3 of them even believe that the Supreme Court should throw it aside. How's that going to be an advantage for the Democrats when they get into the fall campaign to argue that a plan that the people never wanted, don't want, and has now been rejected is somehow a good deal for the Democrats? We'll watch as the arguments continue and as the arguments move from the Supreme Court into the political battlefield in the months ahead. In the meantime, pay attention to not only what the Supreme Court is saying, but the questions they're asking. That may give some insight into how the court may actually rule at the end of the day on Obamacare. I'm Steve Gill. We'll have more with the Daily Notes each day at gillreport.com and more video Daily Notes in the near future.